Hello there, truth seekers and supernatural activists. Welcome to the first episode of Mysteries of Our Realm. Each week, we will dig up the ugly truths and fears that have haunted our humanity for centuries, if not millenniums. This week, we will be discussing you guessed it, what we know about vampires and how humanity has feared them for years. Well, recently in the 21st century, vampires have been portrayed as something fashionable and desirable. I think a great example of that is the talking disco balls from Twilight. I couldn't make this episode without mentioning them. But it hasn't always been like that. Vampires have been mentioned all around the world for many centuries, and it is only recently that we see them as anything other than demonic figures that kill, crave blood, and have no humanity in them. Well, if we really want to start looking deeply into this, we have to go all the way back to the roots of this. Vampire folklore has been around since the 15th century, and way before that, and it has been spread all around the world ever since. Now, according to the research that I've done, the resources will be displayed in the description of the episode, Romania has feared vampires for ages, and that's what inspired Bram Stoker's Dracula. Originally, there's a Romanian belief dictated that the males of the species can father children with human women, whose babies would consequently be born as moroir, or live vampires, in comparison to the so-called strigoi. I don't know if I'm saying this correctly, but they are the dead vampires. This year has been going on until as recently as 2005, when a group of 6 village men exhumed the corpse of a fellow villager that they were convinced became a vampire, a dead vampire, a strigoi, so to speak. Being Romanian, they remembered the ancient and disgusting local way of getting rid of the monster for good. This consisted of sprinkling the body with garlic, removing the heart, burning it, and drinking the ashes in a glass of water. That's disgusting. Like, going through all of this trouble to kill a vampire, potentially, and they might have been wrong. I don't even want to think about whether or not they were wrong, but that's just, it's brutal. I mean, they think vampires are evil, but I'd say this is pretty evil on its own. In Mexico, we have hairy fiends and turkey imposters. Tall, hairy, and friendly creatures is the description of Mexico's Corti. I don't know if I'm spelling it right. Chorti. Chorti. However, these are vampire Wookiee hybrids. These would potentially look like a Chewbacca. They are nice creatures, apart from the occasional devouring of human blood and flesh. Yet Mexicans always believed that it could be worse. For example, the Civetateos, don't know if I definitely didn't say that right, which are white and chivalrous creatures who lurk in crossroads and temples to eat children. And lastly, I cannot spell this. Tlaciqiu. Whatever, who are just as likely to turn into balls of light or turning into a turkey. Honestly, I think I would not be afraid of something that can turn into a turkey, but maybe that's because I'm not a child and it wouldn't hurt me. But yes, these can be very different to what we would normally see as vampires. But, well, I'm not going to go through all of the countries here, but I'm just going to speed run it simply. But if I want to put it simply, there's many derivations of vampires all around the world. I couldn't go through all of them, but Here are just some of them. Australia. Outback monster, a short red man with a disproportionately large head. Germany. Epidemic inducer Neontoter. India. Bowel-wearing menace. Malaysia's femme fatales. This is... I had no idea they called it femme fatales. Maybe that's where the word comes from. This Southeastern Asian country has a whole pantheon of blood-sucking ghouls. Some of them, such as Langsuyar and Penanggalan, have the... I totally didn't say that right, I'm sorry. Have the power to appear as young, beautiful women. Imagine the surprise when they start looking for babies to suck dry at night. The Penanggalan become particularly blood-curdling when the sun goes down, as she severs her head from her body to fly around and look for houses with children to prey on. Oh my god. That is... I would not want to see that. That... yeah. China's hopping undead. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. I mean, the articles that are down there in the description, they all go into like deep detail onto these, but I didn't think it would be necessary since there's a lot that we have to uncover. Well, now that we had a look at vampire mythology around the world, let's look at specific cases that leave me chills. Fans of Anne Rice may know that New Orleans inspired most of her gothic novels, especially the best-selling Interview with the Vampire. This is taken from the article, by the way. However, locals believe that the city is actually the home of real vampires. During the 1930s, brothers John and Wayne Carter were executed for committing multiple murders. About a dozen bodies drained of their blood were discovered after a bloodied young woman managed to escape from their apartment. Sightings of the brothers are often reported to this very day, as their bodies mysteriously vanished from the family's funeral vault. Well, that's a weird one. I would not want to go to New Orleans and find the brothers and die in a mysteriously blood-draining death. Well, another creepy thing that I would find about New Orleans is there's always something else. Like, it's not even just vampires. There's voodoo witches, the famous La Marie, there's so many haunted areas. It's honestly, I mean, I would want to go, but at the same time, I think that it wouldn't be nice. I mean, it would be thrilling. It would be like living in a horror film, because you know the history and all of that, and you look at the places where bad stuff happened and you just feel the chills. Or maybe that's just me. I don't know about you guys. Some people really like going into those creepy places and feeling the chills. Those dark tourists, I think. Yeah. Anyway, another story here is about another vampire story, actually. I think it's New England Vampires or something. It's all in the articles. You guys can have a read for yourselves. But so apparently there were bodies that were being reported, and people started thinking that they were coming from the graves and that they were coming back to life. And the story starts with some children near a hillside that found the first graves. One ran back home to tell his mother, but the boy produced a skull. Because this was Griswold, Connecticut, in 1990, police initially thought that the burials might be the work of local serial killer named Michael Ross, and they taped off the area as a crime scene. But the brown, decaying bones turned out to be more than a century old. The Connecticut state archaeologist Nick Bellantoni soon determined that the hillside contained a colonial-era farm cemetery. New England is full of such unmarked family plots, and 29 burials were typical of the 1700s and early 1800s. The dead Many of them children were laid to rest in thrifty Yankee style, in simple wood coffins without jewelry or even much clothing. Their arms resting by their sides or crossed over their chests. Except that is for burial number 4. Bill and Tony was interested in the grave, even before the excavation began. It was one of the only 2 stone crypts in the cemetery, and it was partially visible from the mine face. Scraping away old soil with flat-edged shovels and the brushes and bamboo picks, and the archaeologist and his team worked through several feet of the earth before reaching the top of the crypt. When Bill and Tony lifted the first of the large, flat rocks from the roof, he uncovered the remains of a red-painted coffin and a pair of skeletal feet. They lay, he remembers, in perfect in a perfect anatomical position. But when he raised the next stone, Bill and Tony saw that the rest of the individual had been completely rearranged. The skeleton had been beheaded. Skull